Hi there, welcome back to the RRC workshop. In today's episode I'm going to be working on the engine. So first thing I need to do is get the CRX shell out of the booth. With that done, it's now time to get my new engine loaded onto the crane and into the booth. So the engine that will be replacing the old carbureted single cam D15 engine is this fuel injected twin cam D16A9. The old D15 had around 100 horsepower and this new engine makes around 130 in standard form. So all in all, a nice little upgrade for the CRX. Now before I go on, let's address the elephant in the room. Why didn't I choose a B16, B18 or K20 for the engine swap? And the answer is very simple. Cost. For the cost of buying a single B16 engine, and that's just the engine, not including the gearbox, loom, ECU and all the other ancillaries needed, I could buy 5 D16 engines complete with gearbox, wiring harness, drive shafts, etc, etc. And I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to pay thousands of pounds just to gain 30 or 40 horsepower in a car that's already super lightweight and was already fun with its asthmatic 1.5 lump. So that's the gist of my decision, but if you want a more in-depth explanation, check out my video on my Patreon page. Now let's crack on with some work. I'm starting this engine teardown on the gearbox side as I want to be able to get the engine up onto the engine stand as soon as possible to make working on it a bit easier. You can tell this engine has never been ran with anything other than the correct coolant, as is evident by the spotless water jackets. With these last two bell housing bolts removed, I can now split the gearbox from the engine and get a good look at the clutch, which I suspect may be a bit on the worn side, as the biting point felt a little high when I test drove the donor car. Well, as expected, there is a fair amount of wear on the clutch. The flywheel is still in good condition though, so that's good news. With the gearbox and clutch out of the way, I can now get the engine off the floor and onto the engine stand. Now to remove the intake manifold. I'm going to take this off in as big a chunk as possible, as it will make keeping track of everything a little bit easier. Just like everything else on the engine, the heat shield and manifold are in great condition. And with the removal of the timing belt casings, the engine is stripped as far as I need it to be for the moment. I'm now going to give it a thorough degreasing, so that's why I've left the cam cover and timing belt in place, just to keep everything safe and sound. With the block and head now spotlessly clean, I'm going to give them a quick dust with etch primer and then a blow over with raw aluminium tinter to give the engine that freshly cast look. Plus, with the block being painted, it will be easy to keep clean in the future and won't oxidise again. Now while the paint is curing, I'm going to freshen up the bracketry with a little blasting and powder coating. With the solely metal parts now powder coated and baking, I'm now going to spray paint the engine mounts the same colour, as I obviously can't powder coat them due to the rubber in and on them. Now before cracking on with the rest of the engine, I need to clean up the ancillaries, and since I know for certain that they function perfectly, I won't be tearing them apart. But that also means I need to clean them with the minimum amount of water and chemicals, and blasting is a definite no-no. So let's get on with all the scrubbing, shall we? All clean now, all it needs is a little masking and a bit of painting and it will look as good as new again. Well, that's the ancillaries looking almost as good as new. Now let's do a bit of zinc plating. And as I'm sure you are all getting very bored with seeing this process now, I'm just going to jump ahead. But for anyone new to the channel, or that's interested in the process, I will leave a link to my zinc plating guide in the top corner and in the description below. Well, that's 90% of the clean-up work done. Now, let's wheel the engine in and tear into it. Locking the cams on this engine is a piece of cake. It's as simple as placing a couple of pins in a couple of holes. So as you would expect from a Honda engine with only 30,000 miles on the clock, the valve train is like new. Barely even run in, as the enthusiasts would say. Which brings us on to the question of why am I lifting the head on such a low mile engine that I know firsthand is a perfect runner? Well, it's simply to satisfy my curiosity and to do a bit of preventative maintenance. The engine may only have done 30,000 miles, but it is from 1994, so it's 30 years old, and it would be silly when I'm at this stage not to fling a new head gasket in. Everything looks good here. It's not so pretty here though. As you can see, the gasket has definitely seen better days. Although not blown yet, I think after a few, let's say, spirited drives, it would be toast. So it's a good job I lifted the head. The head bolts get torqued down in two stages. The first pull is to 30 Newton meters, and then the next is 73 Newton meters. Now, if I'm going to the hassle of doing the head gasket, I might as well put a shiny new water pump in too. The camshaft end seals are next to be replaced. It's best done now, as it only gets more difficult the more I build the engine up. With the cam bearing caps on, that of course is followed by another torquing session. Now for a new timing belt. The engine is now safe again, so the locking pins can be removed. Always remember to put a little oil around the seal of your new filter to avoid it being damaged when tightening. There's not really much to show with the intake manifold. It was given a good clean and then, as you can see, reinstalled with new gaskets and nuts. Now it's time to get the cam cover ready for its new coat of paint, and the first step of doing that is, as always, to break out the RRC brand Super Ultra Lethal Paint Stripper. The paint stripper has done its job nicely and liquefied the paint. So after a little scrubbing, cleaning and a quick bake in the oven, it's ready for a new coat of paint, which I've decided is going to be wrinkle red, just like a B16 or K20 cam cover. And before the comments start to flood in, no, I haven't forgot to prime the cover. This is a direct metal paint. Now while that's baking, let's crack on with the rest of the build. If you cast your mind back, you'll remember that this CRX is equipped with air conditioning, but sadly the donor vehicle I got the engine from didn't, so I thought I may have to do away with it. But as luck would have it, all the bracketry and pump is a straight transfer over from the D15 lump to the D16, so that was a very pleasant surprise. No Loctite is used on the pump bolts to aid future adjustments. You didn't think I was going to refit the old cast iron manifold, did you? This, and the rest of the stainless steel exhaust, along with a few other planned mods, should allow the engine to breathe a lot easier, as well as making a few extra horsepower. Now to fit the aircon pump. I left it till after the manifold was on to make sure I wasn't going to have any clearance issues. Now let's check in on the cam cover. If you're wondering how I achieved this result, it was done the exact same way as my B16 and SR20 cam cover videos. The links to these videos are up in the corner and in the video description. And with that, the engine is now rebuilt and ready for action. I'm honestly over the moon with how good this little engine looks. I really think it's going to set the engine bay off nicely. Now I need to get it off the engine stand to fit the new clutch and gearbox. The blue tool I'm using here is a clutch alignment tool. If you don't centre the clutch properly, getting the gearbox on turns into a nightmare, especially if it's a big gearbox and the engine is still in the car. Clutch pack on. Now to deal with the release bearing. And just as quick as that, we have one engine and gearbox assembly ready to be dropped into its new engine bay. With the engine in 2 of the 3 mounting points, I now need to support the engine from below so that I can remove the engine crane and fit the gearbox mount. Well, the engine is securely mounted in place and looking good. It certainly is a big upgrade from the old carburetted single cam D15. It would have been nice to see a VTEC lump sitting in there, but as previously mentioned, sadly my budget can't stretch that far, so this sweet little D16 is the next best thing. I don't know about you guys, but I think this episode is more than long enough for one sitting. I did hope to get the engine fired up in this episode, but sadly there is still a ton of work to do before that can happen. But I think there's been great progress made in this episode, and the finish line is within sight. So I hope you will join me next time to finish up the mechanical work, fitting the wiring loom, and lots of other jobs that I've forgotten about just now, that will leave the CRX nearly ready for the road. And let us all take a moment to appreciate the people whose names are scrolling past at this very moment. Let's take a moment to appreciate and say thank you for their generosity, without which these projects just couldn't happen. and I for one am extremely grateful for their support that enables me to keep bringing you these restoration projects. So, if you'd like to see more in the future, why not fling a couple of coins into the patron bucket? Anyway, take it easy my friend, and I will see you all again very soon.